Welcome. My name is Emily. And this isn't just a story I tell, it's something I lived. It's a memory that stayed with me, not because it hurt, but because it showed me how people can misjudge quiet strength, until life forces them to see it. The day my younger sister Amelia got married, the world seemed to be dipped in gold. Everything sparkled, from the strings of lights curling around the grand venue, to the clinking glasses and flower arrangements so perfect they looked artificial. It was a wedding people planned for months, maybe years, with color palettes, seating charts and guest lists longer than novels. Amelia deserved it. She had always been the light, beautiful, social, loud in the best ways. I loved her deeply, and I wanted nothing more than to see her happy. But I won't lie, as I got dressed that day in my small one-bedroom apartment, I felt the weight of how alone I truly was. We had grown up differently despite being in the same house. She was close to our mother. I was closer to silence. She had friends who turned into bridesmaids, cousins who cheered her on. I had myself, and I'd grown to be okay with that. Mostly. I wore a soft navy blue dress, one. I had altered myself after buying it from a thrift shop. My shoes were clean but worn. My hair was in a simple bun. No makeup artist, no jewelry box laid out on a vanity. Just me, looking into the mirror, reminding myself, "You're here for Amelia. That's all that matters." When I arrived at the venue, I stepped out of a taxi and looked up at the glittering entrance. Music drifted out the doors. Laughter. The kind of polished joy you hear in expensive places. As I walked in alone, the feeling hit me immediately. Eyes. The kind that scan you head to toe before even saying hello. I didn't see faces at first, just expressions. Raised eyebrows. Tight-lipped smiles. A girl in a crimson dress leaned toward her friend and muttered something, followed by a giggle. A man in a tux, someone I later realized was a cousin of the groom, looked at me and smirked, nudging the person beside him. "Is she a plus one? That's Amelia's sister. Where's the rest of her family? She looks simple." Their judgment wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. It was sharp enough to be heard in a glance. I kept walking, my heels tapping softly against the marble floor, my heart quiet but steady. I didn't dress to impress anyone. I didn't show up with the intention of being seen. I was there because my sister was marrying the love of her life, and that meant more than their whispers ever could. I found a seat toward the back of the hall, far from the flash of cameras and the gold-rimmed nameplates. I sat alone, watched the rituals unfold. My sister looked radiant, glowing with joy, wrapped in her bridal lehenga. Every now and then, her eyes would scan the room, and I'd wave lightly when she caught mine. Her smile told me she was glad I was there. People passed me, some nodding, some pretending not to see. I didn't mind. I opened my little black notebook, a habit of mine, and started writing thoughts. I've always written things I could never say aloud. I never thought anyone would read them. Then everything changed. Midway through the evening, the music lowered slightly, and a buzz spread across the hall. A distinguished man had entered, tall, silver-haired, wearing a black shawani with deep silver embroidery. His presence was commanding. You didn't need to know him to know he mattered. Whispers followed his steps. "That's the groom's uncle, Mr. Shabir. The one from London. He owns half the import businesses in the city. He's powerful, respected. Everyone expected him to walk straight to the bride and groom, to bless them, pose for photographs, sit at the main table. But he didn't. He paused at the center of the room, scanning slowly. Then he began walking, not toward the decorated aisle, not to the family section, but to me." I froze. Unsure. Nervous. I even looked behind me to check if maybe He was approaching someone else, but he came directly toward me. I stood up quickly, unsure of what to do. He stopped just in front of me and smiled. Not a polite, forced smile, but the kind that says, "I see you." He extended his hand. "Emily," he said softly. "I've been wanting to meet you." I blinked, stunned. How do you know my name?" From inside his coat pocket, he pulled out something that made my heart stop. A folded page. A copy of a letter I had written 2 years ago. One of the many I had anonymously submitted to a mental health blog, hoping it would reach someone who needed it. "This," he said, holding it gently. "Your words. They saved my son's life." Tears rushed to my eyes before I could stop them. He continued, "He found your letter at a time he was ready to give up. You didn't know him. You had no idea. But your words were like a hand reaching into darkness. He still carries it with him. Still reads it on his worst days." The room had fallen completely silent now. People who had whispered earlier were now staring in stunned silence. And then Mr. Shabir turned toward them. "I saw many of you turn when this young woman walked in alone," he said, his voice steady but filled with calm authority. "I saw how some laughed, whispered, judged." He paused, letting the silence settle. "But let me tell you, she didn't walk in alone. She walked in with more courage, more character, and more compassion than most people ever will. What she gave to my family, without knowing, without asking, is more valuable than anything you're wearing tonight." Then he did something that silenced the entire room. He lowered his head. A small bow. A gesture of deep respect. Not out of formality, but from the heart. He placed his hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Thank you." Then he walked away. That moment didn't need a spotlight. It didn't need music. But it echoed through that hall louder than any announcement ever could. The people who had smirked earlier couldn't meet my eyes. Some nodded in shame. Others came up to me, hesitating, as if realizing something too late. I didn't stay long after that. I congratulated Amelia one last time, hugged her tightly, and slipped out into the night, the same way I came. The moral of the story is, true worth isn't measured by appearance, wealth, or the size of the crowd you walk in with. It's revealed through quiet character, compassion, and the impact you have on others, even when no one is watching. Never underestimate someone just because they walk in alone. Sometimes they carry more strength than the entire room combined. This story teaches us that dignity, kindness, and authenticity speak louder than status, and that one silent act of good can echo louder than 1,000 loud impressions.